There is no part of this nation that is immune from a natural disaster. The disasters will be different: tornadoes, superstorms, hurricanes, droughts, floods, fires. West Coast, we talk earthquakes. But you can talk earthquakes on the East Coast, and certainly the New Madrid Fault in the central Missouri area ought to keep everybody a little bit nervous. So wherever it is around this nation, the disasters could occur, and the response, which you described, is critically important. That is the forewarning and then the response when the disaster actually hits. But the preparation to put in place the infrastructure to best protect those critical parts of the communities. Ms. Velasquez talked about the refineries, which were badly damaged by the storm. There are certain things that can be done to protect them. In doing so, you protect your power supplies, the grid systems, seawalls, the like. All of these things are critically important. I remember last year I was on this floor with my colleague from the New York area who was deeply concerned about another storm that came through. Was it Irene, I believe, that came through the northeast and created significant damage. Mr. Paul Tonko, you spoke with great skill and compassion about your citizens. Lessons learned, things to share with us today.
Sure. Representative Garamendi, thank you for leading us in this very important hour of discussion. As I listened to Representative Pallone speak about the disaster in his district and across the map of New Jersey and now into New York City and Long Island and great portions of New York State, it was shades of not so distant past that came to mind, and we're still doing the recovery from the storm of August, the flooding of Irene and Lee in August of 11, which impacted my district severely. You know, human lives that were lost, property that was damaged, homes that were swept away into the river, everything for which people had ever worked taken from them. Drastic situations. And so as we do our work here in Washington, we need to make certain that on this House floor there is advocacy for the response to these given situations. You know, already the price tags coming forth from the leadership back home. Governor Cuomo, for instance, suggesting the price is now, the impact has now steadily risen. And, you know, at first snapshot, you can't begin to comprehend all the damage and all the aspects and dynamics of recovery that would be required. But now we're looking at something like $30 billion that impacts a state in a very severe way, disrupts service, electric power that's disrupted, commerce that's frozen in place, human misery that's incalculable, where lives have been impacted forever by the forces of Sandy. So, you know, this is a revisitation, so to speak, as we're still recovering. You know, it was a fight on this floor to make certain that disaster aid monies were brought into play so that we could respond with compassion and with dignity and integrity to these given situations. So the lessons here are to go forth as we deal with this given fiscal issue at hand, to go forth with the priorities that reign the most urgent and important and meaningful in putting back the fabric of these communities. There is a need to work closely with an outlay of resources to FEMA, making certain disaster aid is at the level that will be required here. Working with other agencies that are as significant in the equation, the Department of Transportation, the Small Business Administration, working with HUD, making certain that all of these various elements are addressed in our sense of advocacy here. The human misery, again, is impacting. It's a situation that now brings to mind the fact that in upstate New York, and even in metro New York City and the Long Island area and in New Jersey, these are atypical situations for hurricanes to rise that far north, to travel that far north. To have something in upstate New York do the sort of hurricane damage that we witnessed last year is not typical. And so the nomenclature of 100-year storms, is just ludicrous. It doesn't speak to what's really happening. We've had several storms in a 20-year period that were dubbed 100-year storms. So right there, the logic and the nomenclature is misrepresenting the facts at hand. We are getting more and more repeats here of situations from disasters driven by Mother Nature, and as Representative Pallone made mention, a 500-year storm is what they were dubbing the case to be in the 21st Congressional District that I now represent in the state of New York. So there is a need here for us to be cognizant of those responses to disaster situations, but also to look at the bigger public policy issue, that of the environment, and that of climate change and global warming. We need to be cognizant of our stewardship over our planet. We need to make certain that if these data that are compiled are telling us that there is increased precipitation, for instance, over a given Catskill watershed in the area just south of my district, let's be aware of that. Let's know what's happening here, and let's respond accordingly to sound public policy as it relates to the environment and our stewardship of the environment, and let's be cognizant of the needs in responsiveness measure. I'll just say this, and I know that you want to add to this discussion here. I'll say this. In a time where government perhaps has been hit hard by critics out there who are suggesting there's no role for a public sector here, we need to reduce government, I can tell you people were addressing the war room, as they designated it, putting together all of the professionalism and academics and people who operate these programs and are well trained, watching that compilation, that collaborative effort of these professionals who are responding through public sector employment to the needs of these given communities is powerful. And it speaks to what I think the public asks for and deserves: sound, effective government. But this option of no government, I know people were reaching out. They wanted that partnership because they were in such immense pain and at a loss for how and where to move. So Representative Garamendi, thank you very much for bringing the focus to what should be our staunch advocacy for people in need.